Aiden Biasi.
Mr. Nick.
It's good to have you in the studio. We just recorded, we'll finish recording some content for you, and now we're doing a podcast on the Better Project. And the reason I wanted to get you on, I sent this to you in a message, is I've known you for only a short period of time.
Very short.
What, maybe 3-4 months, maybe?
Yeah, if that, to January. I think it was the first time. Oh, no, last October when I came in to film with Daniel.
That's right. And what I said to you, and I'm going to say it again, I highly respect you as not only as a man, but a father to your children, your family, everything that you've created.
Thank you.
And the whole direction that I'm taking my podcast is speaking to high-performing men in terms of that intersection of, okay, how can you be a great father, a great partner, build a business, still focus on being the best version of you, because it's not easy.
It's not at all.
Especially when you add kids into the equation and all the stresses of life. It does get challenging at times. And I seen a quote the other day is, you know, if you think it's hard being a dad, it means you're being a good dad.
That's right.
Because not many dads will actually show up and put in the work that's needed to not only create that strong foundation for their family, but can continue to work on themselves. That's probably the hardest part, because I feel as a lot of men, we just shut down ourselves. We push our own needs and our own feelings to the side and go, okay, we've got to put our family first, which to a degree, yes, our family is a massive part of our life, but our family's not going to grow unless we grow.
No, of course.
And we need to be having more conversations. We need to be having, you know, a big focus on, okay, how can we build ourselves up so our family can grow as well? So it's going to be interesting where we take this conversation today around family, being a dad, I guess the dynamics of relationships these days. There's plenty to talk about there.
There is. We've both lived quite hard and fast in that respect too. And I wanted to touch on how nice it is that you think I'm high performing, but in the high achieving dad. But I think most fathers out there that are dedicated to their kids and devoted to their family are high performing in their own way, not just creative ones too.
Exactly. And that's what I mean. Like, it doesn't have to be, all right, you have a podcast, you have a business. It's like, are you actually turning up as the best version of you for your kids and for your family? For me, that's high performance as a father.
Absolutely.
And they're the conversations I want to have. But before we dive in, your amazing sister Dana
did, yep. She
baked these hot cross buns, and it's nice and warm. I would love to give you some, but you can't because you're in carnivore.
But I requested specifically that she make a number of them so you can share them with you, because I know you said it was your mum's birthday today, so your mum can have some, your daughter can have some, and my sister's a very good cook. You can find her on Instagram at Designs by Dana as well, but I really think she should kick her interior design and start making organic hot cross buns for a living.
I think so, because these are probably the best hot cross buns that I've had. They're actually incredible, and I know I'm teasing you right now.
3 ingredients. I've had my fair share, don't worry. 3 ingredients. You go to Baker's Delight, there'd be 50. And what's the difference? The difference is I'm not trying to poison you with any ingredients or trying to lower your vibrational energy by feeding you seed oils and soy lettuce and all that kind of thing. All it takes is organic flour, sultanas, and some eggs and some water, filtered water, reverse osmosis. Got to be very, very, very specific about these things.
Exactly. So yeah, shout out to Dana. Keep going, Dana. Keep cooking up this amazing stuff. And
I don't think her partner knows how lucky he is.
Oh man, women that can cook they're amazing. Absolutely
I agree.
Amazing.
An art that's been lost, I think, as well. And to put her partner on the spot, even don't know if he'll end up watching this, but I remember that when they first moved into their place, my sister being an amazing cook, and she's quite entrepreneurial like you. She's building up a business in a way where she can be at home. So when she does want to have kids, eventually she can work from home and be an attentive mother. But there were some issues there about was he doing a lot? Was she going to work? He kind of wanted her to go as well to kind of share that load. And we kind of thought to ourselves, well, hang on, the domestic duties are sharing a load. And I think that if you can find any kind of, not excuse, but the opportunity to have your wife at home, then that's an amazing step forward. Some feminists would say it's a step backward, but for me, that's a step forward, because nowadays, in my opinion, I'm finding that a lot of men now are finding themselves quite drawn to traditional women, and I think Australia is proof of that. I mean, why do you think so many of Australians go overseas to find wives? Because there's something happening here. I'm not saying all Australian women are bad, and what makes up Australia is a very broad tapestry of people. It's diverse. So, but when you think of your average Australian woman, you'd kind of think of can't cook, just wants to go to work. And I feel like a lot of men are saying, you know what, enough of that. I kind of want to be looked after at home too, in a sense.
Do you also, you mentioned like women wanting to go to work, but I feel like a lot of them don't want to go to work. It's just the society we're in now, they're forced in a way to go to work. And then when a man says, "Hey, I can look after you," I don't know, a lot of women get their back up and they feel like then they lose power or freedom in a sense.
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to education. So if we want to go right to the beginning, then you'd have to go right back, I think, to the turn of the century when, I guess a few certain elite families then, from what I looked into, I can't remember the author, but the title of this book was The Occult Origins of Feminism. And I wish I could remember the author's name, but if you look up The Occult Origins of Feminism, you can easily find it. So this woman that wrote this book went into depth about how feminism was an actually created concept to then bring the woman out of the home. Both people are working. Both husband and wife are working, which then creates dual income, dual tax. But where does that leave the child? That leaves a child vulnerable and then at the mercy of the state. I mean, when I dropped my son off to daycare, I saw a kid in there that was still in a rocker, 6 months old. And it broke my heart. I said, this child needs to be with its mum. But unfortunately, they have to work. Not everyone is so lucky. So if you go back all the way back to then, all right, so now we're taxing both incomes, family unit's broken. And it's a shame because then a lot of these women were sold this real, I think, false bill of goods saying, you know, a true equality to a man is working. Whereas I think, no, I feel like on a soul level, they are equal. But when it comes to roles in society, it doesn't become a question of equality. It becomes more of a question of biology and what works in harmony. So if you think you have to go out and work and earn as much as I do to be equal to me, well, I think that's a foolish notion. I think that you have to realize that you are born as a woman with certain set of qualities, which then means that you can bring a certain attribute to the family, which I cannot. And then that creates harmony. So there was a very good reel on Instagram that I saw. Again, I wish I could source quote the source of it, but it was said, you know, man provides the food, I provide the meal. Man provides the house, I make the home. And it works like that. And do I think that that's kind of been lost in our society now? Yeah, I think it has, honestly. But it kind of comes down to people not being able to think for themselves. So now both couples have to work. It's expensive here. I understand that. But having said that, I don't understand how, if it's the vast majority or a minority of women out there now are thinking that working is an empowering thing to do. It's almost like now women that come up there, it's expected of them. But how many girls do you see? I mean, you have a daughter. So then what kind of things would then you be instilling in her? Like, will you still be saying, no, run around in your tutu, be a woman? Or are you more like, no, don't embrace your femininity? So I feel like that's kind of what's happening now. This separation of gender, saying, no, it all has to be fluid, which I think is wrong. But having said that, the media will amplify this as a mainstream thing. But on street level, when you're down there in the trenches, you don't see it. So it comes down to what's real and what's being portrayed as real. And I think the more people that kind of fall into the trap of getting their information from these sources lose touch very quickly of what is real. And as much as I don't like bringing it up, you go back to COVID times and you think, oh, there's people dying on the street. Everyone's sick. But you go out onto the street and there's people out there like normal. So what do you believe? You believe what you hear or you believe your eyes? The choice is yours. I prefer to believe my eyes. And I think that, to be fair, people are breaking the mold of this manufactured form of female empowerment because, to be quite honest with you, I don't think they were ever oppressed in the way that we were told. I mean, were they shit husbands? Yeah. Are they shit husbands now? Yeah, of course. Are women oppressed now? Yeah, in some respects. But to say that there was a woman at home 100 years ago that had to provide for their family, all right, well, you jump in the coal mines as well and you see how your family fares. Do you know what I mean? It's I think we play very fast and loose with the term oppression, and we have to actually realize what is oppression. If you're forced, it's oppression. But if it's a choice, this book, The Occult Origins of Feminism, was very interesting because it said that, all right, so the man goes off to work. This is maybe turn of the century, 1800s, 1900s. So what does the women do? They stay home with their sisters and they raise their kids together and they cook for the husband. Like, what about that sounds oppressive? Like, do you understand? But, in my neighborhood, I drive to work and I see the line of women, young women, beautiful women, childbearing aged women in suits with briefcases waiting in a long 1 kilometer line for a bus to get to the city. That to me is oppression. Would you not so much rather be at home cooking for your children? And a lot of them don't even want children. You know why? Because they say, I'm not ready yet. Okay, it's fair enough. But you got to remember, as a fellow father, you're never rich enough. House is never big enough. Car's never nice enough. So what are you waiting for? I want to go out, sow my oats a bit more from the male perspective. When I stopped drinking, when I stopped engaging in vices that are unfortunately in Australia encouraged heavily, there was a vacuum that needed to be filled, and I filled that vacuum with love. I got married and had children, and it's amazing that when you stop these pointless vices and empty aspirations you have, not getting married because I still got so many good nights out, I just think it's just such a terrible way of thinking, and it's really corrupting Western culture now, and we can really take a page out of the book of traditional families and cultures in Europe especially, because village life as well. I feel like these are the things that we lose in the cities. But that's my little spiel without having to ramble on too much.
No, and I agree with a lot of what you said, and you being a father to boys, me being a father to a little girl, it's something that I'm challenged with on how I raise my daughter, because I want her to be a strong, independent woman and build and create things for herself.
Of course.
But I also want her to be in touch with her feminine side, and when she meets a man, to be able to open wholeheartedly to him. Not be a slave.
No.
You come together as two wholes and you pour into each other and you build each other up.
Absolutely.
Yet, I feel, even reflecting back on my own relationship and just getting out of a 9-year relationship, we got together very, very young, and we were both immature. We both didn't know, I guess, our place in this world, and we didn't experience life before we got together. And I do feel like we got together too young, and I feel like a lot of relationships are happening too young. Like it's not like it was years ago when our parents got together and they got together young and they got married and they have kids. It's a different world now.
Very different.
And I feel that's why relationship breakdowns and divorce is so high, because there's just so much stimulation. There's so much happening in this world and so much to experience that we're not doing that, and we're just attaching ourselves to people. And then we have kids and we get the house, and then we realize, oh, fuck, I'm not happy. I'm with someone that I shouldn't probably be with, but I'm attached to them. And they either stay and be like a toxic relationship, or they break up and they're like nearly 30 and they're like, holy shit, what now?
Yeah, 100%.
And that's challenging. Like I'm going through that right now, and I expressed to you before, I'm like, I'm 28, I got a kid, all the good women are pretty much taken. What do I do in my life? How am I going to find another woman out there to continue building my family with?
100%. And I think from the woman's perspective, should you be a woman saying the same thing but saying it about a man, most women would say, well, you don't need a man. And I could say the same thing to you. I don't think finding the right woman is always going to be the answer to your problems. I think a lot of older married guys would say that's where your problems are going to start, honestly, is finding another one. And then when it comes down to all the good women are taken, I feel like maybe what our idea and expectation of a good woman is these days is varies between people. And we're so saturated now with all these false realities. So as you said, like our kids are going to grow up. Like, so for example, for me, when I first met my wife, she grew up in America. And immediately my view of her reality was already warped of how she grew up, because my whole view of American culture was purely from American Pie, from all the cheerleader movies. So when I said to her, "What was your school like?" Was it what the prom was the cheerleader with the prom king with the quarterback, and she goes, "You've been watching too many movies, because that is not how it works at all. My school was probably just a lot like yours was." So immediately my reality is so like misguided and fake, because I've been getting it from some trashy source. So when we look at kids now, I think back before technology, you look back at, I guess you can say, the olden days, what kind of influences were shaping your ideas and perception of relationship? Your mum, your dad, your aunties, your uncles, the people around you, and books. There was no movies. There was no other form of like saturating media to tell you what to aim for. So I think now that's when we have to be most careful and realize that our kids are watching us, and regardless of what's around them, it's very important, in my opinion, to say, all right, well, look, there's so much filth out there. We as a family, as parents, as units, have to be the human filters of this and say, no, all right, this show says, but this girl's so empowering. She goes around, sleeps around. Oh, but their relationship is so much better because of this. I said, like, you got to understand, like, these TV shows, they're not real. And I know we can go through life thinking that they're accurate, but really it's so much further from the truth. Like, even just listening to movie dialogue and how they talk to each other, it's not like this. It's very, very, very different. So I think that just makes it even more important for you to have to be a pillar. And even if you are a single mum or single dad, when you do end up inviting other women or men into your life to date and court, you got to kind of make sure that, hey, like, this person has to be able to also be a role model for my child if they're going to be possibly raising my kids. And that's with no filth. Can this person be capable of this? And I don't think there's any shame in, like, moving through it, as in, like, you have them over, talk to them a little bit. No, you're not going to work. At the end of the day, I've got a kid now. They come first always. Yeah, it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one to navigate, but I think when it comes to this, there is no right answer. There's only like good answers, because everyone is different, but everything we hear is opinion. It's not fact. And what is going to work for you is just what's based on your circumstances. Everyone's circumstances are different. So that's why I always say, don't ever put your eggs in one bucket. There is no right answer. It's just what works for you. And the funny thing is, even at work and at the shop, I get so many people coming in to get haircuts that are divorced. 20 years, don't know what happened. Now, for me, I'd like to think of myself as a critical thinker. You always want to take the man's side. But I always know there's three sides: their side, wife's side, and this is the truth. And for you, you said you just got out of a 9-year relationship, and I say to a lot of these guys, I said, well, you've probably been done a massive favor. You don't even realize it. I said, would you rather have figured out that this isn't working now, or 20 years time, or when you're married, or when you have more kids, or when you have more material things tethered to you that will then leave your possession because they're taking it, because that's unfortunately the way the courts work here. They're very biased to women. And to me, that's a big thing. This person came into your life obviously to teach you some kind of lesson. And this is just the crazy way that the universe works. It's the crazy way that God works. Humans are kind of built to serve others, but not always in a way that pleases you. Sometimes that person coming into your life can be the biggest pain in the ass, the biggest bane of your existence. At the end of the day, you come through that crucible of suffering that person has put you through, and you think, I come out better. I learned a lesson from this. And that's the way you have to look at these kind of things. Do you know what I mean?
There's a beautiful quote that I've been, it's in a song that I've been listening to a lot. And it goes, I'm a little bit hurt, but I'm a lot more free.
Mm-hmm.
And that really sticks with me, because yes, I was with my ex for 9 years and we had a lot of great memories, but now it's crazy that not being together and being able to to sit and really reflect on the 9 years, because when you're in it, you don't really think about the past and reflecting.
You're not present.
Yeah, but when you take yourself out of that equation and you go, okay, fuck, I could easily sit here and blame her for leaving and not wanting to be with me and all this stuff. But actually going, hey, what role did I play in this? What role did I play in the lead up to this? And a big thing that came out for me was speaking about what we said before around the traditional roles. I wanted a traditional family. I wanted to provide. But it got to the point where I feel like I was too much of a nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
I was too busy trying to please her and to provide and create this perfect environment for our family instead of actually being a gentleman, being a man and being a leader. I feel like a boy full of insecurities, not wanting to lose. So I was just trying to please, not wanting any conflict,
Of course,
not wanting any anger. And that actually showed up, now that I'm seeing it, it was showing up in my podcast.
mm-hmm.
As in, people would say something and I may not agree with it, but I wouldn't counter it.
Have the confidence,
Yeah.
the confidence to rebuttal there.
Yeah, I didn't want to cause any conflict or anything like that. I was like, oh yeah, I agree. And then just move on to the next point.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I'm not going to grow as an individual. I'm not going to be an actual man if I'm just being a people pleaser. You need conflict. You need to be able to have conversations that they're still healthy. You're still having a debate about something. You're still going back and forth, but it's a healthy conversation.
Well, of course, it's productive. I mean, those hurdles become the way. You know, you're molded by this suffering. You know what I mean? It shapes you. And without pain and without suffering, you don't change. It's the same cliche thing we hear over and over again from athletes and from students, is that pressure creates diamonds. You know, but there's a reason why things are cliches, because they get mulled over so much and we don't listen to them. We make it so complicated for ourselves. And then, you know, what you said about those gender roles, most men these days, they want traditional women. They all want traditional women. But this is the problem with men these days. And for me, I'm not talking out of the sense that I'm perfect. You know, when we touch on, we get in more deeper into our relationships and how our family dynamic works, you know, you will see that, like, the reason why we can talk about these things is because we're not perfect. You know what I mean? You know, and me as a Christian person, you look in biblical times how, you know, Peter, apostle, betrayed Jesus 3 times, denied him 3 times, but then goes to write in his biblical passages the importance of being prepared for when these kind of things happen. And you would say, well, you're a hypocrite because, you know, you didn't follow your own advice. You betrayed your teacher, your savior. But having said that, that doesn't make him a hypocrite. To me, that gives him an exclusive right to be able to say, hey, you have to be doing these things because I let myself down and I didn't follow through with my own advice, which then means I'm in more of a position to tell you not to do what I've done. I've been there, done that. I mean, who would you rather take advice from? Someone that's done it all or someone that's just read about it? Do you know what I mean? And that's why I always like to bring it back to scripture, because there's a lot of really good lessons in there that talks about being a man. You know, a lot of people would say that those old school kind of values are very oppressive to women, but not really. A lot of them say, all right, fear your husband. There's a good Orthodox saint, St. Paisios. I was listening to a good podcast about some of his ethics about marriage and about the husband and wife dynamic. And it said, you know, your wife should fear the husband. But if you look at the proper translation, fear just becomes a word for respect. If you love something, you respect it. And that has to work on both ways. Like I said, you're both equal in your souls, but you both aren't equal in this physical world. You both bring something, but not being equal does not mean that one is better than the other at all. It's not like that. It's more equality, as in we all bring something different to the table. You're more equal to me in this, I'm more equal than that. There's a reason why the man is the head of the household, because they have to shoulder all of these things. And the reason why women are the nurturers is because men by nature, even though a lot of the single dads have to be nurturing, they're not really, like, how many men do you see that can do what your missus does when that kid's born? Or how they try and get out of it? Like I don't really see it. It's because it's just not how we're built. So then I go back, I'm not saying that we can't be like that, but inherently not really.
It's tough to play both roles.
It's very tough to play both roles, but men obviously have to get in touch with their feminine side, but I feel like that's swung a bit too far. So to go back to what you said, men want traditional women, but does that mean the men of the world are ready to step up and be traditional men? And I don't think a lot of them are, because they've just totally forgotten, this generation, what it takes to be a traditional man. And that doesn't mean looking back in the old days where it's factory work and hard yakka, like, yeah, for sure. But it means you have to be very emotionally resilient. You have to be ready that you're going to always be the person that's going to make the mistakes. A lot of men don't really get hurt. It's all the women. But how much do we see of men being the punching bag for everyone else's emotions? And they never get hurt because it's always just complaining. It's tough for dads out there. It honestly really is. And I think it honestly comes right down to, you just got to find the right woman. And if you think they're all taken, as I said to you before this podcast started, you were so fixated on finding the right woman. And I said, just have faith. The right woman will fall in your lap. I feel like as soon as we start looking, that's when the problem kind of tends to arise. Like for me, starting the podcast, I already know that if you start it with the intention out to the universe that I want to make money, this is the way I want it to be. Money itself is energy. It's not inherently evil, but the love of money is. So if you're putting all these passions into a project for the love of money, then it's not going to go the way you want it to. So the point being, you got to make sure when you're looking for a woman, you're looking for it for the right reasons, not because I crave companionship. It's like, no, there's a part of me that isn't complete and I want to be completed like that, which I think doesn't come from looking. It comes from just living your life and it'll fall in your lap. It's being smart enough to know when the opportunity's there. There's opportunities all around us. There's good people all around us. But whether you go up and talk to that girl or not, it's completely on you. You know what I mean? I think we forget that so much of it, we try and leave so much of what we want. Oh, give me a sign, like bring a girl my way. They're all around you. It's up to you to take that responsibility to go then and make that a reality for yourself. But having said that, sometimes it's best just to leave it alone and just let nature take its course.
You have to be the right man and whole within yourself too, to actually attract the right woman.
Well, 100%. Absolutely.
That is one thing that I've now come to terms with. Like, I need to just take this time just to work on myself and be patient and trust the process. And as you said, have faith.
Just have faith, have faith in God. Scripture will say, but even the universe, regardless of scripture, if you're not religious, will say that the universe is in you, God is in you. So having faith in God is having faith in yourself. Having faith in yourself means just doing what you do, keep on keeping on, and it will fall in your lap. Eventually it will. And I feel like something my dad told me was obviously that when you leave relationships, there was probably a point in that time where you hated yourself. Like, what's wrong with me? Like, what am I doing wrong? Well, this is why a lot of people can't move on straight after breaking up, because, well, if you can't love yourself at this time, how's anyone else going to? And it really is as simple as that. And energy is very palpable, and someone will be able to pick up. If Nick's walking in the shopping center, they can say, oh, there's something about that guy. You feel it. Even though it's not tangible, you can feel it. Because we are spiritual beings. We can feel these things. But because we're so numbed and distracted by bullshit, I think that's why we kind of fall into these, not sinful relationships, but just carnal relationships that mean nothing, which is fine. But you should always be seeking, I think, a companionship or a union that's going to elevate you and bring you higher.
Yeah, because if you jump straight into another relationship, in a way, really, it's just a distraction. And I got people going, oh, go out there, meet other girls, get that out of your system, distract yourself. And a part of me is like, I want to, but another part of me is like, maybe I should just sit and just feel every single feeling that is happening right now, because that is how I'm actually going to heal and work through this. Because if I just go distract myself, I'm just delaying the healing process.
Of course, it's a Band-Aid. You're not fixing anything.
So I'm stuck in two minds on what path I go down, but I'm just feeling everything at the moment. And if a woman comes and we talk, hey, whatever happens, happens.
I find it very interesting in that little regard there. it's separating actual emotional need from your physical needs. So if you could take sex out of it and say, okay, what am I actually craving? Am I just craving like, I need some physical companionship, or I want emotional fulfillment? I feel like when you take that out of it, you can really answer that question. Like, what am I actually after? And that's what makes me laugh about this whole post-nut clarity concept, which I find is very funny, because then you kind of find that like, oh man, I don't know what I want. All right, let me just go bust one out and see how I feel after that. And then you're like, you go outside, wash your hands hopefully, and then you take a breath and you think, all right, well, that was over in 5 minutes and I just feel empty again. And that's separating the carnal pleasure from what you actually want. And for men, that's hard. You can't let the small head tell the big head what to do. But for men, that's something old as time. And that's, I feel like, mastering your domain and being able to separate the carnal pleasures from what you actually need, which is why marriage is so beautiful, because all of a sudden that lust is gone.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing, because obviously you still go out with your friends, you go out and with your missus, and you can't help but notice a beautiful woman. But then you think to yourself, look what I've built with this woman. Look at these kids. If I really wanted to be that person and be unfaithful and sleep with her, I would have that same clarity I had, just what I had with myself not long ago. You'd wake up feeling empty. What have I just thrown away? So mastering yourself and working yourself is so important, but also separating the sex from it too.
Yeah.
Not to sound like a real bored, like stale preacher, but it's important. But I've been there before. I even have these struggles now.
We're men, it's hard.
It is very hard, especially when in that what is it, like that funny thing where they say, well, it's not Murphy's Law, but that thing where they say, as soon as you become unattainable, all of a sudden people throw themselves at you. And for me, from my Christian background, I think to myself, this is the devil trying to tempt me to break something beautiful, a sacrament that I've made, the sacred I've made to a promise I've made to God, I've made to my wife. I'm married, I got my ring on, but I'm still young and attractive. I'm a DILF, man. So
You are.
I am. And my wife's like hot too. So I'm thinking to myself, all right, all of a sudden, here's a hot dad with kids with a ring and a missus. And then all these women think, man, like, that's what I'm after. I want that. And then a lot of them, they try and flirt with, this does happen. They flirt with you and everything like that. And you got to think to yourself like, no. I've given this up. This is not for me anymore. These are succubuses. They're trying to draw me in, because no good woman with good morals or good, strong moral fiber will try and have relations with someone that's married. That's already a big no-no. It shows a much more of their character than any other act would, I find. Trying to sleep with someone that's married, it shows you have no respect for them, no respect for their family, their kids, and none for yourself.
And it's not a woman or a man that you want in your life.
Oh, of course, it's just something you want inside you for the time being. It's true.
True. It is true. So let me ask you then, how do you make your relationship work in terms of the traditional roles? Because coming back to reflecting on my previous relationship and trying to, I guess, make it traditional, and I built the business to a point, hey, you don't have to work, you can stay at home. But then it just caused more conflict, because down deep, she wasn't motivated. She didn't have any drive or anything like that.
There's no purpose anymore.
There was no purpose.
Yep.
And I'm reading a book at the moment, No More Mr. Nice Guy, and it talks about covert contracts in terms of, like, as a man, a lot of times we have this contract in our head with our partners of, I put food on the table, I pay all the bills, so you got to clean my house, you got to give me sex, you got to do all these things. Yeah. But you're not actually communicating, you're just having those expectations, and that expectation of, hey, you got to do this.
Of course.
When it just then pushes your partner further away instead of creating that harmony as one.
100%.
How do you make it work?
Well, there's so many different angles I can come from this from, but because we have time to kill, I'll go from all of them. So we'll start from, firstly, I can't take all the credit, all right? And it's, as you said before we started this podcast, I have a big family. We're very close. I've recently, in December, had my second child, so we've moved back home, back to the nest. So I've got my parents, I've got my sisters, I've got their partners, my son's aunties and uncles and grandparents, all living under the same roof. So when it comes to how do I make my relationship work in terms of like the traditional gender roles and expectations, I would say it's not just me. Like, my whole family's making it work. Everyone's making it work. Because to be honest, if it was up to me, it probably wouldn't work as well. And that's what's so important about generational living, is that everyone is helping everybody make this work. So I, on the other hand, don't always expect my wife to cook. I get up at 5:30 a.m., cook my breakfast, and cook my wife's breakfast too. I leave it in the oven because I know it's one less thing for her to do. And like for me personally, with her not working, I prefer it in this way because we're going to leave money out of it. Because as of now, and I can only say this because my family, we have a successful business. My dad worked very diligently, worked hard, saved very well, invested well, to the point where our family can have a level of comfort that a lot of other people maybe couldn't. So coming from that, prefacing what I'm about to say with that, it's very easy for me to say, all right, money's not a problem. Okay? Because, at the moment for me, it's not really. So in terms of that, I'm not living day to day. I've got a support network for me. So for me, when we had our first son and we had our little apartment, that I feel like when my wife was coming home and I was coming home, it just became a massive contest of who was more tired, whose job's harder. It was so much harder to discern whose role was to do what, considering we've both worked. So for me, I still feel that I'm not really one to do the dishes because I can't do it well. So I'll do the garbage and I cook. I love cooking. So for me, I feel like going to work now and providing in the business is not giving me enough purpose. So I say, okay, when I come home, let me cook. I feel like I'm serving you more by doing more for you, because when I come home at the end of the day, especially in winter and it's dark, there's only so much I can do with the kids. So I feel like I can get the most out of it by saying, hey, boys, come here and watch dad cook. Mum, just relax with the little one. Let me do it. So organizing gender roles in my families from the next angle, other than from my family being massively involved, which helps a lot, is that my wife comes from a culture that is quite different from others in this country. So my wife's Mexican. That then by default entails very, deep Catholicism, faith, big families. And when I go to Mexico, you do normally find the men drinking, women cooking, men cook the barbecue, women do everything else. Everything works well and they have their roles. But the good thing is I had a wife that grew up with that, and so did I. So then it's very easy to take that blueprint and apply it without much of a shock. So I find it's not hard, but that's when she's not working. It's much easier for me because I can come home. She's got the time. Beautiful. Food's ready. I say, can you please do this for me? Can you cook whenever I come home? And she does it. But sometimes I ask her not to do it because I want to cook. Because when I come home from work, I want to disconnect from work and throw myself into something a little bit more traditionally feminine, because I think it's important to get in touch with their feminine side. I grew up with 4 sisters. So I do have a feminine side that I'm in touch with a lot. And it's important because that creates like duality. Do you know what I mean? You have to be able to understand the feminine point of view. Otherwise, you can't effectively have a relationship with a woman if you can't understand them. So there's that. There's my family. There's her cultural background. But for me, honestly, it's got to come down to communication. That is the biggest one by far. Because as you said, we have these contracts in our head. You're expected to do this because I'm doing that. Well, hang on. I'm not expecting her to do anything. There are a few things I want her to do, but I would never demand it of her. I would kind of have to say, do you think it's fair that if I'm doing this, you're doing that? It's up to you. It really depends on your relationship. But for me personally, we make it work, but we have had our issues in the past. And look, it really comes down to just communicating. If you're feeling something, say it. Don't wait till it festers. Don't sit on it any longer. Just be straight out and say, hey, I'm feeling this. But my wife is not good at that. Her family dynamic growing up was very different to mine. Her family were immigrants to their country, as was she, and they were insular. Whereas my family was huge and not much privacy. Everyone knows everyone's business. Everyone always runs everything by my parents before they do things. Whereas, we supported a very deep family dynamic that you support each other. Whereas my wife's family dynamic growing up, from what I can see, was very much one of independence because it was just them. And so when my wife gets quiet and doesn't like speaking and goes, just goes cold, I said, well, no, hang on. You communicate with me, please. But then it breaks down and you have to realize that, okay, it takes her a couple of days to cool down and then she speaks. But I don't work that way. So you got to find that balance. It's tricky, but it can be done, but it's tricky. I mean, even I'm still navigating it. But I hope that answers the question some
it does.
sense.
And I can relate to your wife's point of view in terms of how she deals with the communication aspect, because that was exactly like myself. I would have thoughts and feelings but not want to bring it up.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want the conflict, and that actually, now reflecting, stems back to my childhood in terms of the relationship with my dad. I felt like I could never open up and speak about feelings and emotions because it would turn into anger. And then it made me feel bad for having those feelings because it would just bring up conflict and anger, and I didn't want that in my life.
Yeah.
So then in my relationship, I just played the good guy, the people pleaser, not bringing up stuff. And then when I did bring up things, I never articulated myself correctly, which then turned into a heated conversation and then held me back from doing it. So it was just like a never-ending cycle. But it is, now I see it definitely is important that we do have that open and honest conversation and communication, especially around roles. As you said, it's like, hey, if I'm going to work, putting food on the table, do you mind if you keep the house tidy? I know we got multiple kids and I know it's going to be hard, but hey, can we try and keep on top of it, Yeah,
but even adding on little bits of extra, if you can, if you have time.
Yeah.
Whereas I find myself demanding it sometimes. And, everyone deep down, regardless of how pig-headed they are, they know that they're being demanding. They know it, but their ego just doesn't allow them to be able to step back and say, I know I'm being like this. And I say to my wife sometimes all the time, I say to her, I can be the big dominating husband if fucking you if that's what you want. You know what I mean? But I know that I give it a little bit of a hard time sometimes, but as you said, it's all about working on yourself. You have to heal your own traumas. And, my parents' relationship wasn't perfect, but it's lasted over 30 years. And I think a lot of it from the woman's perspective was just like, your husband's the head of the house. That's ordained by God. You're head of the household. You have the responsibility. And it's very funny because on this podcast this morning, I was listening to again about the Orthodox saint, Paisios, was also saying that the husband's the head of the house. He's the king of that domain, but he's also the lowest laborer there too. Do you know what I mean? He has to shoulder a lot. And for me, that speaks volumes to me because not everyone is healthy. Not everyone has a clear-cut kind of life. Everyone's got their shit, but you don't want to compare to others. But I feel like it's very important to make sure that. And one of the advice I hated getting growing up was it could always be so much worse. Everyone's got it. Some people have it worse than you. Some relationships are much worse. And I find myself saying that to my wife all the time when she's not happy about something. I say, well, I could be hitting you, could be bashing you, could be forcing you to think the way I think. Even though I don't really force her to think the way I think, I try and give it to her in little hints so she comes to the realization herself. But, I feel like don't worry about others. Nick and I, you and I could have the same outcome, same 9-year relationship, same breakdown, and we will internalize it in different ways. So, for me personally, in that respect, I've had my difficulties, and I know that you're quite familiar with them now. But I bring it right back to, if it wasn't for my family, man, like honestly, I don't know where I would be. But to be quite fair, we're all in the position we need to be to get to where we have to be. So if you don't like the position you're in, well, you have to find a way out of it. Well, then you were in that position to find that way out, to get yourself onto the right path. And that's just trusting the divine plan, trusting that it's all going to work out for you. And you just have to trust that process. And, but in the meantime, there's trusting the process, but there's also, you have to work on yourself. This is a big psyop, I think, when it comes to scripture and Christianity, is putting your faith in God and leave the rest up to him. I say, no, not really. I think that's a little bit of a cop-out for people just to sit back and just expect it and do nothing. I said, if you are the true embodiment of God, you're made in his image, well, then you have to be looking for these opportunities. You have to be making these things happen. If you want these doors to open, you got to make the key. And, signs won't come to you. So if you feel like there's a sign that your marriage needs work, don't just kind of say, it'll fix itself, trust the plan. Like, no, you're the plan. You have to fix it, which I know can sound contradictory to this whole thing of, don't look for a girl, let it fall on your lap. Doing what you're doing every day is going to make that happen. You're out there filming, you're looking good. Someone on the set where you're filming likes what they see. Well, you haven't done anything, but at the same time, you've done everything. You've just been yourself. You know what I mean?
I love that you just mentioned like you are the key, because when we were in Thailand and we did mushrooms, that was actually one of the biggest realizations that came to me. And first time sharing this, I had a vision, because I felt like for me to step into, I guess, the better version of myself, or the best version of me, I thought that was from something external. And I was teleporting down this dark tunnel, and I was seeing all these faces. I'm like, is that the person? Is that person? That's going to help me grow. Got straight to the bottom, and all this is a key and a lock.
Yeah.
I'm the key.
Okay.
That was the biggest realization. Opened my eyes, and it was just this single palm tree. Not everything else was blurred around it, just a single, which represented myself and being, it's me. I've got to work on me, work on being the best version of myself. Yes, have faith, but only good things are going to happen if I put in the work.
Of course. It's just a lesson old as time, and all the Stoics, all the people we talk about throughout our podcast, they've been saying the same thing. Your life and your problems are purely just your reaction to them is what's going to decide the outcome. And obviously, if I punch you in the face, it's going to hurt. That's just, just physics and biology. It hurts. But you can either reply in anger, or you can think to yourself, why did this just happen? Why has this guy punched me out? Was it something I did? Was it something I said? Or was it a king hit? From doing nothing? I'm not sure. But it all happens for a reason. You know what I mean? And your reaction to it is going to solve everything. It's the same with, just anything with relationships. It's just all how you react. And for me, I don't practice that as much as I feel like I do, considering I'm a very learned, Stoic student. But it takes lifetimes to learn these lessons. Do you know what I mean? You don't learn them overnight. Even Marcus Aurelius was telling us these lessons. And if you look into what his reign as emperor was like, he had one of the worst ones. He had the Antonine Plague, he had wars and everything around him, and he still had the time to say, you know what? I'm calm in the storms around me, which is why so many people look to him in times of trouble, because he was riding that through massive duress. And when you are the head of a kingdom, just like when you're a father, you're the head of the house, when shit goes wrong around you, who do they look to? They look to you. And that's why it's so important to take these lessons and really reflect on them.
Yeah. We've spoken about. Did you?
I was going to say, heavy's the head that wears the crown. The king's role, the father's role, isn't just newspaper, coffee. Bring my breakfast over here, darling. Get me a beer, son. There's way more to it than that. That's just what the shitty kind of American, media movies would show you that it is. But it couldn't be further from the truth.
Definitely, it's the sacrifices we make, the decisions we have to make when we cop the brunt of it.
Always.
We spoke about your family a lot, and you have a big loving family, and there's a support everything that you do. Even the first time we went and filmed the podcast at the barbershop, all your family's there helping set up. I'm like, wow, this is my parents love me, but they never supported me on that level. And part of me was kind of jealous. A part of you growing up, you're probably like, oh, fuck, I hate this.
You're jealous and I'm taking it for granted. And it was that jealousy and envy, and that you telling me, fuck, you're lucky, made me sit and think, fuck, I really am lucky. I've taken it for granted for so long. Some people don't have this love around them. So, you sobered me with those comments.
It is beautiful. And what I wanted to ask is, you obviously said your parents' relationship was never perfect, right? No relationship's perfect.
Of course not.
The thing with that older generation is, compared to now, I feel, is that they just make things work. Whereas even in my circumstance or other circumstances, people are so quick to just leave and think the grass is greener on the other side instead of actually sticking at it and making things work. Why do you think our generation really is not keen on actually wanting to make things work?
Well, our generation now is built on this impulse where it's what I want it now. But then also bringing it back to people's lack of critical thinking and their lack of being able to kind of see, it's a sign of an intelligent mind to be able to take ideas, put it in your back pocket, let it marinate. When you take it out of your back pocket, you know what? I don't agree with this, but I can understand the root of why this person has said it. So to take ideas, to reflect on them and not necessarily agree with them, but still reflect on them is a sign of intelligence. So when you think of our generation now, they've taken so much from everything, media, all this saturation, and it kind of warps the way that they see things. Oh, well, this celebrity's just done that, so why can't I do it? You know, they glamorize the wrong things. And so when it says, why are we so impulsive to leave relationships? Because as soon as it gets hard, well, that's it, I'm gone. But then this is the thing, weak times create weak men. But having said that, does that mean you then wish for hard times? Well, not really. It means stop running from challenges and run head on to challenges. If you're about to hit an impasse with your missus or your marriage is in a rough spot, well, instead of running, you got to face inward, face yourself and start and address why these problems are happening. But a lot of people don't because they can't hack what they see. You know, as funny as it sounds, it reminds me of this scene from this movie, The NeverEnding Story, that my mum introduced me to when I was a kid. She loved it when she was a kid. And I remember in the movie, Atreyu has to go through these two gates. And one of the gates is, when you get to it, you get to the first gate, the Southern Oracle, which is the gate to the Oracle. Essentially what it is if you get to that gate and you don't feel your own worth and you don't feel your own self-confidence, the beams from those cherubs that were guarding that gate destroy you. So Atreyu was up on the mountain and he's watching this knight with fancy armor go to the gate. And the scientist that's nursing him back to health said, here's a guy that looks fancy, but let's see what he really thinks of himself, because this gate that he's going to can see right through you and it will pulverize you if it can sense any hint of self-doubt. So boom, that knight gets pulverized. Atreyu runs to the gate and then jumps through, and the whole time Bastian, the main character, is yelling, have confidence, be confident in yourself and you'll make it through this challenge. And boom, he makes it through. But then without thinking about it, he runs to the next gate without consulting the scientist on the next gate, which is the Oracle, which then says most people get to this gate and it's the hardest one, but conceptually it's the most simple. And simple as in the gate is a mirror, and when the person looks in the mirror, they see their true self. And the scientist in the movie says most people, when they get to this gate and they look at their reflection, they run away screaming because they can't handle what it is that they see. And I think that movie, although it's a great 80s movie, is a very good metaphor for how we're seeing relationships, where you can't get through that hurdle without confidence in yourself. And my wife has said to me so many times, you know, you're leading this family. Start having confidence in yourself. Stop running everything by your dad. Stop running everything by your mom. She goes, make your own decisions. She goes, you can take bits from them, but she goes, I feel like you take too much from them to heart. She goes, have your own thoughts. You know, you read the books, you listen to the podcast, you practice this. But when the time comes, you have to practice it then. There's no point doing it in peacetime. You have to be practicing this in times of war. So I said, okay, which could just be another metaphor for just conflict or trouble, the crucible. So anyway, I feel like that last gate that movie was describing is the hardest one. And the reason why a lot of people run away screaming from that gate is the same reason why a lot of people run away from that relationship, because they just can't truly face that I'm a misogynist fuckwit. Or they simply can't face that I'm the problem here. So I'd rather my missus leave me and then tell everyone at the bar, oh, she was just, couldn't deal with her. And I took a lot from that. And I'll be the first to say that I own up to every mistake that I've ever made in my relationship. You know, I am what I am, but there's so much room for improvement. And that's what marriage is. It's a journey. It's a bonding between two people. You're then in your engagement, and going back to this podcast with this saint, it was saying that, you know, your engagement back in the day when people were virgins before they met, you know, and I think that probably wasn't as big as everyone thinks it is. I think a lot of people that went to wedding as a virginity was bullshit.
Yeah.
But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that it was. The engagement period, according to this saint, when someone came to him for marriage advice, is that during that engagement, don't let it last too long. But also, that's when you cultivate your friendship. You're engaged, we're friends. Why have we got engaged? You have to reflect on that. And then when you're married, that's when it all starts. This is where you have to say, all right, what are we offering each other? Why has this union brought us together? What are we going to build? And I just find it very interesting that as soon as like you know yourself, you know exactly what you can bring. And both partners have to both come to that conclusion. But when it comes to kids, this is why it's so much better to be different from your partner, because as they say, opposites attract. You know, if I was dating my missus and we were both stubborn and we were both quick to anger and we were both had tempers, we would tear each other apart. But, you know, I've got the temper and she's got, hey, shh. And so your child, when that time comes, is taking from mum, from dad. And that's just the beauty of duality. You know what I mean? It's just, it works. That's why I feel like you have to know yourself, you have to know who you are. And once you know who you are, then you know what you can bring to your relationship with your wife. But it's the journey. You know, even after 30 years of marriage, I don't even think my dad knows everything about my mum and vice versa.
Yeah.
But when it comes to 60 years, and then it gets to a point where maybe sex isn't the main component of your relationship anymore, and it's purely founded on love. And I think that's the melancholy part about marriage, is when it gets to that point, you're not having sex anymore, your kids have moved away. That's when I feel like most people divorce, because all the purpose in their life is gone. But if you've cultivated that purpose in your marriage very early, then when your kids move away and you're not attractive enough, or you can't get your boner anymore, you can't have sex, and you're just purely based on love, you stick together. And I feel like that's what I cherish most from my grandparents and all the old wogs that I've ever known, is that like they can sit there. It is this funny episode of Everyone Loves Raymond that it encapsulates this so perfectly. Is if you're familiar with the show, Ray's parents are like notoriously dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Like it's so funny. But then Deborah and Raymond are observing them in the kitchen, and they're just sitting there eating a meal, eating sandwiches that she made for them. They're not talking. And then, you know, he takes a bite, a little bit left on his cheek. He's reaching for something. There's mum, there's Marie, napkin, knows what to do. You know, he finishes his bite, reaching for, she pours the water. There's no words. It just fucking works. And as I said a little bit before when I was filming my reels with you, sometimes like silence just works. You don't have to just cultivate this. You don't have to talk. You know, I always find like what's worth wasting energy on words that mean nothing. Sometimes it's better just to sit there in silence, know that we're in harmony, we're in such sync that we don't even have to speak. Because I know that as soon as my mouth gets a bit dirty from that sandwich, she's going to be right there with the napkin. No words being spoken. You know, because sometimes I feel like even for me, the more you speak, the more you get yourself in trouble.
Definitely.
And the Spartans had a very good way of looking at it, despite them being quite backward, which is why their empire fell, was that, you know, they never spoke much, but they only ever spoke at the most necessary time. And they had to make sure that everything they said would pack a punch. Xerxes says, my arrows will block out the sun. Well, then we'll fight in the shade. There was nothing else he needed to say because he made the effort. But also, philosophically, before we continue, and I don't remember which philosopher to attribute this to, which I should know, but I said my retaining of knowledge needs work. But I think it was Socrates or Plato or something that said, the fool speaks because he has to say something, but the wise man speaks because he has something to say. So don't be a fool. Don't speak because you have to. If you have something to say, you say it, not because you feel like you need to. And I hope that I articulated that quote right, because a lot of it sounds the same, but it's all about tone. You know, the fool speaks because he has to say something, but the wise man speaks because he has something to say. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's what I attribute to how I go about podcasting. Is like, we have two ears and one mouth for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, process, articulate what you actually want to say, and then say it. Not just over talk and trying to get your point across just so you can sound smart.
Of course.
No, just actually have a deep conversation and really process what you want to talk about. So yeah, I love that quote, because that is what I take into podcasting. And I know you do the same too. You're very articulate in what you say. You're not just saying things for the sake of it.
I try not to fill my time with meaningless shit. And even if I do get off topic, I always find a way to relate it back to the question, because part of me really wants to go out and start rambling about myself like I'm doing it this very minute.
Hey, you're allowed to right now.
And I'm allowed to. But having said that, though, I have to remember that, no, this isn't about you. This is ultimately about the person that's listening, that is either in a relationship or that is engaging in one, or is maybe has one on the rocks, or that's rocky. And they said, all right, well, if this person that isn't perfect, that has 2 kids, that has all this help around him, is still feeling depleted and like he can't contribute anything, well, what can I gain from this? And that, at the end of the day, as hard as it is to admit, because obviously, you know, deep down you want a clip from this to go viral. You want to have these material outcomes, but you have to think to yourself, no, I'm here to spread a message to people to help them. And that's what it's about.
It's a deeper purpose.
It is the deeper purpose, and you have to, you know, separate the material stuff from it.
Definitely. As we start to wrap up, I want to play this video that we spoke about playing, and then we can have a quick discussion on it.
See what these guys have to say.
So, for people who don't know, actually, I've had this guy on my podcast. So he's gone viral, Chris Griffin, talking about gender roles. This got 1.4 million views on Instagram.
Wow.
Going viral. So
that's all it takes.
That's it.
So incredible.
So let's give it
working unless she wants to work. If you feel the need to go and work to make money, and then you come home and you're complaining about your day, well, we don't need you to make money because we're sorted. We've got 4 hours to spend in the afternoon, and I ask you, how was your day today, babe? I want your eyes to line up with excitement with whatever the fuck it was. Honestly, like the 4 postcards today. And the energy too, it's so good. It's the calm, it's the harmony, it's the peace and love that a man that's got a busy life that's chasing his dreams needs when he's trying to wind down. This is why I heavily encourage hot girl walks. I would love my partner to go on a hot girl walk with her friends every day. She gets this feminine energy, they get to talk their shit, and then they get to have a bit of excitement about their day. I don't think a girl needs to go through challenge, pain, and hardship to be an amazing girl. I think she can fill her days with passion-filled things and still be amazing. I don't want them on.
There's a few things I took from that.
For me, I think he could have maybe articulated that a bit better. I also feel maybe he's like 23, 24. So he's coming from a naive point of view of like ideally what he would want instead of reality.
Subjectively, I mean, everything we hear is opinion. It's not fact, and he's entitled to his opinion. And you can critique it in the sense by saying, well, what does a 23-year-old know about, you know, he's never been married, never had kids, he's had girlfriends. You know, everyone's had girlfriends, which do eventually set you up to be able to be married, because then, you know, I've had a few girlfriends, I've had a few experiences with different personalities. I feel like I know how to navigate them a bit more. But also naive in the sense to say to an audience, you don't have to work if you don't have to. Everything is your choice.
Yeah.
But as he said there, if you're sorted and I'm making enough money, you don't have to work, well, then you have to be filled with some kind of purpose, or you're going to walk out, or you're going to be destructive. You're going to be having a glass of wine at 12 every day. But also the last thing I took from that the most was, you know, something about the woman, like a woman doesn't have to go through pain, hardship, and suffering to be that person. I kind of tend to disagree, because they're the 3 main things that shape people. And if you have met someone that hasn't gone through pain, suffering, and hardship, then I really don't see in what way they've developed any type of lesson in their life. I just think of soft hands. You know what I mean? Now, imagine being with a woman that hasn't experienced any hardship or anything. That just seems to me like a very spoiled girl that's going to take you for everything because she doesn't have to sweat or suffer for anything. So, but be that as it may, it's an interesting clip. I would have loved to have seen some of the comments, see if anyone ripped it to shreds.
There was heaps of comments, and one of the things that stood out for me was him speaking about, you know, go out with your friends and deal with all your, I guess, your stresses and that with your friend group, and then come home and bring peace to me. It's like, in a way, saying, you know, I'm building this empire and I don't want to deal with that stuff, so go deal with it elsewhere. It was like he was trying to paint maybe perfection in terms of like he didn't want to deal with that. He just wanted you to be at peace. But in reality is women are going to have bad days, especially that time of the month or whatever.
Of course.
There's not always going to be light up. Your eyes are going to light up every day and enjoy everything in life. So I guess in theory, you're like, I would love that to be every day. But then I think about it, I'm like, would you really? If it was just all sunshine and rainbows and amazing?
This is definitely someone talking who's been with his girlfriend who he's just found out is really hot, and it's been like 2 months.
The honeymoon stage?
Yeah, it's been like 2 months, and you're like, oh, she can do anything she wants. I don't care. But no married man with kids would ever say to their wife, go pretty yourself up and go walk along the high street with your girlfriends. I don't think anyone would say that. I definitely wouldn't. But I'll tell you a funny story. Before we had kids, my wife and I parked our car behind the main bus stop, caught the B1 from Manlyvale into the city. We're looking good, man. We're both still pretty good and tight now, but we were even tighter back then. And I remember I was just dressed up. She was dressed up. We'll go into a show or something. And literally we're walking up the street to the bus stop, and some bloke in a Commodore pulled up and put his window down and said, "You two look fucking great." And I was like, whoa. And I looked at her and I said, shit, fuck, that felt so good. So instead of sending your missus down to the high street with the girls all dolled up, why don't you look to your wife and say, hey, let's put our Sunday best on, our best foot forward, and let's walk down with the kids, dress them up in collared shirts, and let's just play the role. Let's just be the typical Victorian Sunday family. You walk with me, lock in my arms, 2 boys with the stroller, and just let everyone see superficially what a beautiful, perfect, straight family we are. Because there's no way that you're going to do that on your own with the girls so all the guys can look at you. Well, that just sounds like a bit of cuck behavior. I'm sorry to say that, my friend, but that's a bit cucky to me.
Yeah.
A little bit. But yeah, he's young. He'll learn. Not that what he's saying is wrong. I'm saying that, maybe in a couple of years after a bit of life experience, that view will change. But that's inevitable because that's what life is. It's the learning curve. I don't think I've said anything. There's so many things on that first podcast I was on here with Daniel with Glenn, last October. If I could go back and rewatch that, there are so many things that I haven't disagreed with or changed my mind on, but my thoughts and perception of it have developed because of my maturity. And what have I said it the same way? No, but that's just the beauty of hindsight, and that's how we learn. So it's very interesting that clip. I quite like that aspect of let's break down a clip right here for the audience.
Yeah.
It's really good.
It's cool because when it popped up and I've seen all the comments, and I feel like there is a massive battle between the masculine and the feminine, and I don't know why. What?
It's supposed to be complimenting each other, not battling each other.
We've got to build each other up, and yet
it's meant to be a dance.
We're trying to drag each other down and say, oh, the feminine's better than the masculine, vice versa. It's like, no, and there was a great point on one of the comments saying, as men and women, we both have masculine and feminine traits. We both tap into it at different times. It's not a battle.
No. What's conflicting should be complementing.
Yin yang.
100%. You're meant to be complementing each other, not battling, because... And this to me, and I don't like blaming the gatekeepers of culture, i.e., I suppose the gatekeepers of culture now are really lefties now, because they're the ones cancelling all of it. But, when you go back to the elites, the ones that really control culture, control the news, control everything, this is how they want you to be. Just constant division and bickering between the sexes all the time. Because at the end of the day, both partners are not meant to be doing the same thing, and as much as I'm not much of an Old Testament dude, at the end of the day, Adam and Eve sin in the garden, the man is then cursed to work and the woman is then to childbirth, and that's apparently where it comes from. But like I said, I'm not a big Old Testament dude. I take it or leave it. I'm more Jesus, New Testament. But you think of it that way, imagine both men and women doing the same thing, working the same, and that's how it is now. But this is why relationships fall apart. If we had a clear set of roles to be able to throw ourselves into, and we just said for a minute, hang on, our biology dictates that we do this, is it something I might want to do? Maybe not straight away, but how many 40-year-olds and 50-year-old women will you meet that have just played the field, this and that get to the end of their to the end of their 40s and 50s that aren't married and regret having gone out and partied and they said, I wish I had settled down. You know, you ask me and any married person when their 50th anniversary with their wife, that even if their kids have become drug addicts or killed themselves or whatever, do you ever regret having kids? A lot of them would say, you know what, like if a kid became a druggo, they say, well, yeah, sometimes I do regret having him. But having said that, should he pull himself out of it, become a better person, like who's it for you to say? You know, I haven't really met any parents that ever regretted having children. Like I look at my son now, he's 2 years old, the older one, just watching him become coherent and I just don't understand how no one could want that. It is so incredible. And just the weight off your shoulders knowing that you're not living for yourself anymore. You know, I'm now living for my children is so much better, because then as soon as you adapt them to the way you do things, well then all of a sudden you're not doing stuff for them, you're doing stuff for your family. You know, what's doing something for yourself? What does that entail? Reading, going to the gym, whatever it is to keep your head sane. You know, I imagine my dad, his eyes lit up when I was old enough to come and train with him, because all of a sudden, you know, when they're needy and they're kids, you're living for them exclusively. But then all of a sudden, when they're old enough to do these things with you, you're not just living for them, but now you're feeding off each other to the point where like they're starting to almost live for you, in terms of like, I want to live to please my dad. I want my dad to be happy. And that doesn't always mean good. Some people bloody ruin their lives trying to please their parents. But I guess, long story short, it's just a blessing. And I really don't like the demonization of traditional route of life, being downtrodden all the time. You know, I think getting married and everything's a beautiful thing. And most people, you know the song by Shaggy, Angel?
Oh, yeah.
Girl, you're my angel.
Yeah.
Shaggy says in his funny voice, life is one big party when you're still young, but who's going to have you back when it's all done? Even though it's a real kind of corny pop song, it's just so poetic, because it's so fucking true. That song openly talks about turning your back on the party lifestyle and living for your vices, and, you know, committing yourself to something higher. You know, that doesn't even have to be from a religious point of view. Just committing to somebody and saying, you know what, like, this is what I'm going to be. Like, my thoughts and my actions are now going to be for the benefit of our union. You know, that's something religious and special and spiritual in itself, even for the most hardcore atheist. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's true.
There's only so long you can live the high life of going out and partying and doing those sorts of things in life before you look back and you're 30, 40 and you go, what the fuck have I been doing, you know?
I've fallen for the ultimate psyop, which is that you have to go out on Saturday and numb yourself to be able to but what are you actually numbing? Especially in this country, what are you numbing? Like, you fucking got a job, you got food, you got a home. Like, what are you numbing? You should be...
Tell you what it is, what you mentioned before, the mirror.
I can't face them true selves.
Can't face them true selves. They're full of insecurities, and they just mask all that with alcohol, drugs, partying. Unfortunately, they're going to wake up one day and realize, fuck.
Man, I worked as a bouncer for 4 years when I was an apprentice, and being objectively on the other side, checking IDs. Check the ID, you look up a beautiful woman, you know, makeup, just tight dress, looks good. But then you look at the group of friends that are like, uncomfortable, shoes are uncomfortable, you know, my dress, you know, is tight, whatever. And I just think to myself, like I said to this one group of girls, oh, there's Serbian girls. And, you know, they're quite famously known for being quite pretty. They get themselves real dolled up when they go out. And there was about 4 of them. I said, girls, fucking smile. What you guys all look so upset and angry. I mean, look how good you guys look. But you know what? Who's that for? Because you're going to go out and you're going to look good. And it's great to look good. It's great to feel good. But don't you think there's a difference between dressing up to look good, but dressing up and you're kind of like, it's a bit promiscuous. Like, are you planning on sleeping with someone tonight, or you just got your tits out because it gives you confidence? Because that, to me, doesn't give you confidence. That just kind of is like compliment fishing. Or even... do you know what I mean? Like, it's very difficult to say.
You can feel the difference between someone who just walks around with their tits out and someone who actually has a radiance of confidence, energy bouncing off them.
Well, you've got 2 women, right? I'll tell you which one I would go for. Even when I was younger, because I always thought I always modeled myself off my parents' relationship, and they got married quite young, and my dad instilled good values like that in me. But if you had a woman, tight dress, cut from the middle, so when they walk you can see the legs and the tits are out and stuff, they look good, because you can look like that real sexualized but be classy too. I mean, the French do that well. But then you've got another girl, high ponytail, nice blue jeans, a leather jacket and a good shirt. Like, to me, that's just class. That's class. Because you know that if you got the curves and you got the style and you got the fashion sense, you don't need to show your tits. To me, just showing all that kind of stuff is just like, yeah, it's showing yourself off, it's having confidence, but is it real confidence though?
No.
Because if you're really confident, then you wouldn't need to show it. Just like if you really are, wealthy but not insecure, then you don't need to have the cars. But if you are wealthy and you are insecure, then all of a sudden you've got a garage full of cars that depreciate in value. Like, and I know that's easy for me to say because I ain't got no money and, I don't know what it's like to be in that position of ultra wealth, but you can kind of tell like the difference between I would say my dad's quite a wealthy dude, but he doesn't dress like he is, because I feel like the people that are like compensating. So I say to these women, well, what are you compensating for? Does someone not love you? Is there someone not at home there ready to receive you? I don't know. But as a daughter, you got all these things to look forward to. But as a dad of sons, I'm very excited to say, hey, this is low hanging fruit. See that chick with her tits out there in that tight dress? That's low hanging fruit. Low hanging fruit. It's the first one to get taken by the rodents on the ground, but you want to aim for that one that's a bit higher. You got to climb a bit for it. You know what I mean? You go to Nonno's house, Nonno's lemons, the best lemons are the ones right at the top, the ones you can't get, because the ascent is very hard. It's very easy to pick fruit from the bottom, but guess what's on that piece of fruit at the bottom? Nibbles from everybody else. No, you go straight for the top.
That's it. And you got to work harder for the ones at the top. You got to be more creative, and it leaves also, if they're not showing everything, it leaves, thought of imagination of, oh, what is it like?
Absolutely.
The mysterious. Instead of these chicks that just put everything out there, it's like, oh, well, I already seen it, so what's the point,
And it's even worse when, like, just, from a, let's just say, a single young guy's perspective. And I can imagine how frustrating it would be for them now, especially with social media. Like, my godmother does security, and, she's pretty unapologetically blunt, where she says to a lot of these young girls, like, you do realize that, you're dressed up like this, you're taking all these selfies of yourself, but, as soon as some guy talks to you, it's like, nah, I just this warped fucking, I don't know. I know it's been like that for a while now. I mean, that's been the case for like 20 years now, really. What was it, 2025, 2005? Let's just say maybe 10, 15 years. That's the kind of the way it's been. It's all just who can see me. The instant gratification, as we said, the likes.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, the dopamine gets triggered off so much more when they see 50 likes on their Instagram. Whereas if I went up to you and said, oh, hey, man, like, I love your shoes, I love your outfit, But the girl that's wearing the risque one knows that by translation, you just mean, oh, I love the way your tits look in that. But when you go up to that girl, the fruit at the top of the tree that has had the confidence to not have to show herself off and is more classier, and you said, I love your outfit, that's going to go so much further with her than with the other one. You might as well go to the other one and just say, hey, your outfit's really turning me on. And they shouldn't get offended, because of what the hell do you expect when you walk around the city with your tits out?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Oh, this is such a deep conversation. We could keep going on and on and
about. We could, but yeah, part 2's part 3.
I think we're gonna have to make this a part 2 for sure. Man, thank you so much.
No, that's all right. Thank you. I relish these opportunities. Honestly, I do, and I'm grateful that I have networked with everyone that makes this brand possible to be able to give me a platform to be able to speak, and the fact that it helps you with growing your business and your ventures, knowing that I can be a part of that is reward enough.
Well, you should feel privileged, because none of the other boys actually been on my podcast. You're the first one.
I know. And honestly, when you send me that message and you said like, hey, look, man, I'm like, oh my God, he doesn't want to film my stuff anymore, or I'm like, no, what did I do? Did I offend him in some way? Then you're like, look, I respect you, man. And I'm like, all right, it's sounding better, but this still sounds like I'm getting broken up with. as a dad, as a this and that. I'm like, okay, that sounds better. You know, would you care to come on? Like, yes. I didn't even finish the message. Like, yes. I definitely will, of course.
I appreciate it, and I truly mean what I say too.
Thank you.
You're a man of integrity. You show up for your family. You're a great dad. Your family is beautiful in everything you're doing, and I'm grateful that, you know, I can be a part of the journey with you and helping you to achieve your goals in the content space. So I'm super grateful, bro.
Nothing happens by coincidence, my friend.
That's it.
I'm learning that very fast as I'm getting older. That it's nothing here's coincidence. You're where you need to be.
Definitely.
Always.
Well, stay tuned for part 2 because, yeah, there's going to be a part 2 for sure.